first thing I want you to do is tell me what's so special about Vytautas Magnus University.
Vytautas Magnus University is a beginning. It's a beginning of a linkage between people who have experienced being free, independent individuals in the world, and people who have not experienced that for 50 years, 3 generations really. And the linkage is within a cultural system, within an educational system, within a system of thinking and logic, within a system of feeling, and within a system that will train both sides to, number one, learn from each other and experience what, in these very, very diverse circumstances, has kept their humanity alive. What is the core of being human? And what is the core of love, caring, nurturance, the core of that which, despite everything that is done to a person, maintains their humanity. And I think that's really the core. And I see the mechanism of doing that being very academic. The mechanism of doing that is the love of learning, the training of minds, the training of thought processes, the giving out of information. But really underneath all of that, and just not underneath it in any subtle way, but just touching that, is what is it that can take people that have already been through an awful lot and give them a linkage, a path, an alternative system, a parallel system, where they can reach out and be like everybody else in the world who are free, independent individuals, creative.
What in the way of, let's talk with basic mechanisms, what's different about the university?
Well, I think different from what? Different from the communist system? Different from the socialist system? From the American system?
Let's compare it with the communist system.
Where do you begin? Well, you know, when I was an undergraduate, I was just coming into the 60s, and so in graduate school really was when it hit, student is not nigger, student is a human being. Let's start with that. And here, the rector of a university here in Lithuania, of the Art Academy, just a few years ago said, and it was the headline in the paper, "A student is not human." So let's start with that. The sense of what is the value of young people? What is the value of a human being? I think that's very, very important. And the notion that a student is an individual with rights, an individual that has a tremendous capacity to lead and to learn, and doesn't have to wait until he or she are 50 or 60 before they make their mark in the world, I think is number one, that we're really focusing in on the students as the individuals, to empower them to be individuals, to empower them to be who they are, so that they can take initiative and be prepared for a rapidly changing world. So I think that's number one, whereas the system that exists here is a system that is dehumanizing from grade 1, kindergarten, to not state your opinion, to not say what you think, to not feel what you feel, to deny, to use grades as a source of social manipulation and ridicule. My kids did a psychodrama in their elementary school on the twos, the terror of the twos, using 2 on this grading scale of 5 to 2 as a way of you're going to get a 2, and when you get a 2, and they get graded every day, you're going to go home and you're going to have your parents beat you up because you got a 2. And it's a system of the symbol of the grade, the symbol of authority becomes so endowed, so enmeshed in a person that they will go do cheat, do anything, lie, steal, okay? Do anything for that mark so they can get in their place and then do nothing. It's not a system of getting the very best that people have to offer, getting them to love learning. They love learning anyway. They're born loving learning. But to nurture it, to embellish it, to allow people to play with it. Rather, I think the system that was set up here was a slave camp system, a system of teaching people their place, teaching them not to question their place, teaching them to accept their place, and if they don't accept it, to be quiet about it, because the alternative is if they didn't accept it and made any kind of waves, they would go out. So the entire educational system is set up from the very, very beginning to not what you think. Nobody asks you what you think. It's what is it that I have to learn how to think properly. Okay? And in a much more dangerous way in Lithuania, and in countries like Lithuania that are occupied, different realities, different levels of reality, so that you hear one thing at home and it's kept subtle and hidden. You hear one thing from the media, you hear, and it's called the truth, the newspapers call the truth. You hear another thing from your peers, you hear another thing in terms of your own bits and pieces that you piece together. So what is reality? What is truth? What is authentic? What is real? And at this time, I think this university is real. My being here is real. My kids being here is real. Your being here is real. We're the students taking exams, as you just saw them take, which I found absolutely extraordinary that when they started taking these exams, they had been convinced that there's only one way to take exams, which was to wait in line all day and to have the teacher ask you a half an hour at a time, to be treated as slaves in a labor camp, basically, to have them reach a level of consciousness during this grading period of having alternatives being introduced, having them process the alternatives, having them gone through this exercise of exams, and coming to me and coming to others and saying, God, I understand now what you were talking about. And faculty who were afraid and said, God, American system, you're bringing in the American system, we don't know what that is, I'm afraid, and very naturally afraid, are now saying, I'm beginning to understand the issue of choices and the issue of depth of learning, and I'm beginning to understand accountability, and I'm beginning to understand what you were saying way back when. So I'm seeing the process of this university is not just the process of a free, independent, academic freedom, all the good things, the rah-rah, apple pie, motherhood, and all of that. I'm seeing this university as being a place where we're cultural brokers. And we're cultural brokers with people who have risked everything. These students have risked everything. They have risked their jobs because we're not guaranteeing them a job when they get out. They have risked when and if ever the old regime returns, the communists return, they would be the first ones to be shipped off to Siberia or killed, because they were in this American spy training school, if you wish. It could be interpreted by whoever wanted to get rid of them. They are risking coming on a campus and not knowing what will be offered the next semester or who will be teaching. Not having, this is your curriculum and this is what you'll do for 4 years. Not really understanding a lot of what is said, but knowing that they are willing to risk their very lives to get something better. Not a pass out to the West, but something that will give them the tools for them to shape a society. So I'm seeing an extraordinary group of young people that have taken a tremendous risk by us saying to them that we are going to give you the very best education, accredited, accepted in the West, that anybody else will have. You will be just like anybody else getting out of any other university. And we guarantee that we have a tremendous potential here, more than a potential, a tremendous commitment, a tremendous force in their courage, okay, and their beaming out and saying, I am going to risk my very life, I'm going to risk my very being for these 4 years by not choosing something else, by choosing to be a free person. And so I'm seeing that dynamic, an extraordinary dynamic of people coming from the West, figuring it out. Where are they? Where are you? What level are you at? What's happening here? And then people who are the local population looking at this and saying, I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I'm willing to be scared to be a part of it. And I'm seeing a tremendous magnetic field, critical mass developing, and it's extraordinary for this country.
It's exciting to see students energetic and looking forward to what's happening. How are the professors handling it? What type of response are you getting from professors who have? Yeah, I mean, what's their background and what are they getting into here?
Well, we have a range of people. We have people that are researchers, number one. And they're willing to come and teach at this university with very little teaching experience. And they're coming in from Vilnius. They're coming in for a day. It's a 3-hour ride by the time they get to the train and in and out, 3 hours back. They want to come in because they want to teach what they think is very important, that they've spent their lives researching, because they have only been given in the old system 3-year plans and have been restricted to a very small field, say in culture, ethnography, literature. And they want to share that. But they don't have the teaching skills, nor do they have a way of synthesizing what they know, because they have been denied any theoretical framework. So I'm seeing those professionals, those researchers coming in, wanting themselves to learn what is the theoretical framework that they can apply. So I'm seeing them come into this experience, passing on their information, but asking us, God, I have these bits and pieces of data. Where does it fit in? What is the context? What are other people doing? They have no compare-contrast, or very, very little. Then there's another category, if you wish, of instructors that are coming in that have ideas of developing laboratories or developing research institutes. And they're very excited about forming a team and having the students being part of the team and linking for the first time research and teaching, because it's been denied them. They've had to make a choice. So I'm seeing another category of people already moving on and saying, I am willing to stick my neck out and teach as well as do research and see how it works, because they have never done that before. You're either A or B. I'm seeing other teachers who are teaching 3 or 4 different places and not taking the risk of being full-time faculty at Vytautas Magnus. We don't have the structure for it yet, but wanting to learn how to do it and taking it back to other places. So I'm seeing that. English, the people that are teaching English are the real workhorses, because we have no labs. We have no ESL material, no diagnostic tests. We've made them our own. Very little in the way of what the wealth of what is ESL and EFL teaching. English is a foreign ESL. English is a secondary language. English is a foreign language, and those teachers, some of them only can do home reading, that is, read and discuss. Others of them can teach grammar. Others of them can teach conversation. Others of them have a larger picture. All of them are basically self-taught. All of them have learned English out of Russian textbooks that have been anti the world. So they have gone from Lithuanian to Russian to the Russian version of English with a heavy political overtone. And they're the ones now that are teaching these kids English at this university. And I'm at awe of their commitment, because they know that without English, without that tool, nothing's going to happen at this university. Our goal is, in the first 2 years, through the GE package, General Education Package, and through intensive English language training, that the students will be at a place where we can have anybody come in the fields that are missing: political science, sociology, anthropology, any of the humanities, genetics, ecology, and come in, research design, logic. And it's absolutely amazing. Logic, how do you ask questions? How do you engage in dialogue? That anybody can come in to our university, qualified instructors, and teach, and they can learn. So that's our goal. And the students know that that's the goal. They're ready to meet it. They study day and night.
You're patterning, this university is being patterned after a Western university.
It's patterned after if you wish, an international university. And I make that correction because one of the goals of this university is to have transferable credits, to have accreditation internationally, to have transferable credits, to have people come and go in various plans: the Tempest plan, the Erasmus plan, the EC, if we ever get a chance to be committed or involved in EC, and to the American system. So I'm very cautious when I speak about it to see it as a global phenomena, to see the faculty come in globally from various places, and to see the students coming in to the university and then leaving the university globally. So the conceptualization of this university is really a location, if you wish, an oasis. In fact, the locals call it the New Athens. I think that's a bit grand, but a place where people can come, pass on their information, love of learning, and pass that tradition on in a very real way with the people that they're engaging with. So I see that as and I love Chancellor Murphy of UCLA, who used to speak about UCLA when I was a student there as a marketplace of ideas. And it inspired me, and I conceptualize very, very much so that this is one more dimension, not just a marketplace of ideas, but also an arena for people to experience their humanity, because one of the dimensions that has been so denied these students and others is their humanity, their caring. I don't mean just social skills. How are you? I'm fine. Notice how people said, "How are you?" They say normal. Right? Their humanity. I think that's part of the agenda, is for them to experience their humanity with others who are that way.
We've talked before about the specific differences between the Soviet system, and if you could go in briefly into black and
white, compare, contrast, sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let me use an example, not of this university, but of another one I've just been working with, the Art Academy. Yeah, I should make the Art Academy separated. To be an artist means that you already have professional training from the 3rd or 4th grade, and you are already you're put on a track: painting or sculpture or ceramics or drawing or whatever, printmaking. And then you enter, if you compete and you enter the Art Academy, you've already competed with others that have trained in that narrow specialty. And then when you enter in, you are already categorized as, I am going to be a graphic artist, or I'm going to be into textiles, or I'm going to be a professional in ceramics. And then you are apprenticed with the faculty there, maybe 3 or 4 faculty. And that's who you work with for 4 years. And you go to school in the classroom for 60 hours a week. That was the mode, 60 hours a week. And that means that they will put a plaster cast in front of you and have you draw a simple piece for hours and hours and hours at a time, and the faculty will go out and they'll have coffee and they'll go through town and see shows, and you're a student, as you're supposed to suffer, and be chained to the classroom. And the teachers are chained also, because they have to give accountability of their time. They have hundreds of hours they have to account for. And so the system, and to transfer it to other systems, was set up to, they know where you are. You're in the classroom, and you're in the classroom 6 days a week from 8 to 8. You're there, you're controlled, you're there. And then when you leave, and you have a lunch break, and then when you leave and you go home, you have some assignments to do and some reading to do. But really, the learning happens is when, in the old system, the cramming, I should say, it's not learning, the cramming happens when you have the exams. They're called sessia. And in the exams, you have the exams scheduled one a day with a break of 1 or 2 days in between. And that's when you cram all the facts that you've written down to tell the teacher. You go into the auditorium and you have, for a class, say, 70 questions prepared with 3 questions in 3 question categories. And you pull out of these 70 questions 2 tickets. And you go into the auditorium, and you have the teacher sitting there, and I'll tell you about graphic corruption a little bit. And you have the teacher sitting there, and you can watch other people answer the exams. And you're in the hall waiting all day, sometimes 2 days, for your turn to go up for your half hour with the teacher. And the teacher asks, you pull these questions out, And you answer those two questions and you're asked by the teacher. There's no record, there's no validation. Marxism and Leninism was the backbone of the system. So you could be bounced off for not answering properly about Marxist-Leninism no matter what you did. That was the bulk of the learning. And even if you were brilliant, if you weren't in the right category of person like a Communist Party, Communist Youth Party, or the person that did not answer Marxist-Leninism properly, no matter what you did in these interrogations, and that's what they were, it was nowhere. Now, I'm not saying that there wasn't any learning, because if you were in mathematics, you were able to prepare the questions ahead of time, be tested ahead of time, have the teacher examine you fully, etc. So the issue was not in the hard sciences. The issue was in what's called the humanities, because everything in that area was politically suspicious, so that you were very careful of what areas you could teach. Well, case in point, there's one ethnographer at Vytautas University, and she's aged, she's in her 80s, and they won't replace her, they wouldn't replace her. And when she retired, they would replace her with one other. So there were quotas on certain categories of learning. And when you got into that quota, you waited for that particular area to open up before you went into it. The difference in international system is that there's accountability. There are exams. There is a relationship between faculty and instructor of one of, I'm not here to punish you, I'm not here to see what you don't know, I'm here to nurture you and instruct you and to help you get to know that which you do know for something. There's no sense of holding or pulling a student through school because you have quotas. It's like a factory system. I have to prepare 50 engineers, and that's my quota. And once they're in, I have to make sure they finish. Okay? Because not only is it my job that they don't finish, but I have a factory quota. I'm producing a product. I'm producing 50 engineers or 50 scientists. So it's a very, very different kind of orientation about what is the relationship between the faculty, the students, and the school and the state. I think in our particular system, there's a chance to fail. There's a chance to change your mind. There's a chance to explore various fields without too much risk. You can have 2 or 3 things you're exploring. You can be multifaceted. You don't have to declare one thing and stick with just that one thing forever.
Talk about this lockstep system they have. How you get in, how you get the competition and so forth.
Well, it's really interesting how you get in, because how you get in is who do you know in many cases, and how much your parents have bribed, and how much your parents have figured out which way they can aid you in getting into something. Because don't forget that I'm talking about here in Kaunas, it's no secret that the size of the students, we're talking about 18,000 students that are at Kaunas Polytechnic Institute, now called university, was to keep the men out of the army. If you were a student, you could stay out of the army for a while as a way of protecting the youth. So that's a facet that I want to mention before I go any further, that going to school here was a way of getting out of the army. Going to school here for a young woman was a chance to get married and then look for a place to stay in town, because it was your chance, it was your moment to do something that forever would be closed off with you otherwise. It was extremely competitive. I mean, when you think about a country with 3 million inhabitants and 1 university, and within that university, very quoted places, and in the humanities, very limited areas for languages, foreign languages, almost non-existent areas in ethnography, anything to do with social science, forget that. Philosophy, except for Marxism and Leninism, nothing, right? No safe areas. You're really talking about a very limited arena for people to not only learn about their own culture, but the culture of the world, to learn about systems of thought, etc. And within getting into those places, you had to clear political clearing. You had to have political clearing all the way. So either you masked yourself completely and did not reveal who you were and learned rote memory what it is that I'm supposed to learn. what it is that I have to say to get past these barriers, what I have to pretend that I am, or you actually became that. It's a very annihilating, rigid, extraordinarily highly developed system of taking the individual from the time, and it's not just university system, it's from grade 1, okay, of taking the individual, putting them in chunks of people, telling them that anything that they do that is different will be punished, and punishing them, and creating schisms between girls and boys, age, qualities, using ridicule, which is absolutely deadly, using ridicule for everything new, using ridicule as group conformity, and grading students every day. They get graded every day from the first grade on all the way through high school. Every day by all of the teachers. They get graded every day and reinforced at home that the grades mean, as I said, the terror of the twos. So you get those through there. You get their individuality, their creativity, absolutely wiped out at all levels. And then you put them in the university if they're able to survive that and still even think that they want to learn. Having cheating isn't encouraged, okay? It's laughed at. It's a game between, well, I have to learn this garbage and I know it's garbage anyway, so I'll just write it up. It doesn't mean anything, and if I can get a better grade learning this garbage, then that's okay, because I will finish it and learn more garbage and get a place where I can sit down and do nothing. And that's really how it's been set up. So to alter that means altering the whole thing, but it also means where you start. And we're starting at the place where people have survived and still love to learn, still want to learn. And so we're starting at the undergraduate level. Then we're starting at the graduate level of people that have still love to learn at the area of what they call here candidate, the graduate training, and coming in from the top down and saying, we will give you an opportunity for PhDs, Western style, with Western researchers, Western scientists in your area of specialty, so that you can come back and start teaching the undergraduates. But teaching them in a way that will empower them to ask questions, to probe, to answer, to create, to discuss, to, in a tradition that encourages free learning. So it's almost, I was shocked. Okay, I was absolutely shocked when I arrived and I saw that we were in the danger of becoming frontmen, the props, for a system that had not changed, would not change, but for a name or a title of a course. That all the systems in place were the same systems, but the Westerners who came into this university were basically going to be props and a ticket out the door, a ticket to the West, which is the most highly prized commodity. Being with a Westerner means that, gee, maybe they'll help you get out, or maybe it's not goods and services anymore. They'll give you information that will enable you to be one step ahead of somebody else. And the people that have had access to English language, have had access to leadership potential, are people that have been either children of the elite or the elite in terms of Communist Party, or people that went just the opposite way, people that listened quietly to BBC, quietly to Voice of America, people that did not participate in the structures and used that time to learn themselves. So there's such a varied way of people coming in right now in that particular way. Gary, I wish I could tell you and the people watching how extraordinarily well developed and thought out is the process of dehumanizing people here at every level. It's not just what I described as the school system. It's at the very level where everything that I experience, like going to pick up your paycheck, all right, we get paid once a month. You have a salary. You go to the buhalteria, the cashier, and there is a book, teeny little, like a kid's textbook. And in the little book, in the notepad, is everybody's names of the university in alphabetical order, and all the salaries that they make, your salary. that you make. It's all little handwritten, and you go in, and every month you look at these pages that you're alphabetically in, and you sign your name, and they have the money there that they dole out for you. Well, the first time I went and I saw this, I said, can you explain to me what this is? How this thing, I'm interested. How does this operate? I always ask, what's going on here? How does this operate? And they were all kinds of concerned about, we have too much money in this room and we need a bigger safe and we need a thing. And I said, no, I mean this thing. How does this notebook operate? Well, think about it. Think about it. No privacy, no sense of you, an individual, going in, no sense of accountability in terms of your labor and your work. You are the cadre, they call them. It's like you're the slave labor thing. Or students getting their scholarships. They get 40 rubles a month. On the dollar exchange now, $1 is 20 rubles. So basically they get $2 a month. That's their subsidy for being students. And for those $2 a month, the way they distribute the money traditionally is that they give it to the student leader. They have these little student groups, student leader, and the student leader acts as, it's a way of organizing society structurally. You have one student leader for 10 or 15 in that little group, and that student leader goes and picks up the money and distributes that money to each of his group members. It's all collectivized. It's done that at every level. It's done that in terms of passing information. There is absolutely no way that information is passed from the center to an individual. It's always passed from the center through a filter of a collective of any kind. There's no direct passaging, and you have your place within that collective passaging. So I'm seeing all the way through from this minutia of getting the salary, my saying at every step, isn't there another way of doing this? You say, well, what do you mean? I say, well, for example, how about a card for each person where they sign their name and then you keep the cards? Why do they have to have their privacy, rights of privacy, violated in this way every month? Why do they have to be demeaned in this way? Why do children have to carry around their grade book every day, with 2s or 3s, which 2 is fail, every day, and have it there in a book for the world to see? Why do the students at the university have to carry their grade book with all of their grades written out in it for all of the teachers to see, all of their peers to see at all times? There's absolutely no sense of the individual rights, individual privacy, the notion of autonomy, the notion that one is free of a collective at any step of any way. Okay, it's reinforced at every level, every subtle level. And I think that's the most difficult thing that I have to transfer to people, because I am so used to being an independent, autonomous, free person. And I think that way. That's what I am. And when I see people who ask me, when I say human rights, they say, what are rights? What are rights? What are human rights? What is an individual right? What do you mean? Then all I can do is go through these minutiae and say, there are alternative ways of structuring simple behavior. Like this. This is what I mean. Because it's not the high concept. It's not freedom. It's every step of the way the society shapes, or the structure shapes you, either being a slave or being a free person. And this society has been fighting a war. It has been occupied for 50 years. It has been troops. It has been 1/3 of these people gone to Siberia. Every family I know has had somebody killed in Siberia, killed in the war, shipped abroad, tortured. They're looking at their young kids and saying, I am not willing to lose this child. Okay, I'm not willing to do that. I've had mothers crying when their kids were being sent off to Afghanistan and being come back tortured, and right now tortured in the army, saying, I will not give another kid. And yet they have been so dehumanized that they will play a game knowing that their children are tortured in school. They've been tortured themselves, knowing that and accepting that, saying, what else can I do? So what I'm doing, is I am looking at all of the minutia every step of the way and saying, not that this is wrong, but hey, have you considered an alternative? This is another way of doing it. Have you thought about it? Not radical stuff, not let's go computers, but how about a notebook instead of this notebook? How about a little index card with individual names on it?
Let's talk about, in setting up a university, let's talk about the basic things here that you're having to deal with. It's something that's new to them. Let's talk about what you've got there.
Well, setting up a university, faculty, people teaching. Who are these people? What is their training? What do they know? I don't mean just CVs. I mean, what are their skills in passing on knowledge? Do they hate students? Do they love students? How do faculty that come in from different countries communicate with each other? How do you get faculty commitment so that they just don't come in for 3 hours and leave and say, oh, I've done my duty. Okay, so faculty is one, faculty development, getting faculty to come to teach basic courses, basic things, Western Civ, logic, research methods and design, an introduction to all-level courses, an introduction to a way of thinking and the interaction in the classroom. Okay, that teachers are human, that faculty are human, that teachers are human beings engaged in the same process. And that's very, very important. Libraries. I'm right now having people learn from books that teach them that all Americans live in cardboard boxes in Central Park, for example. People that have faculty that are forced to use books and cross out communism and put down contemporary because they are still teaching that the society evolved from prehistory through slavery, through feudalism, through capitalism, and now the ultimate socialism. They still have that. They have nothing, no alternative forms. They're still teaching that. So library in terms of literature, basic books, a video library as well. I love show and tell. I love, you want to talk about kinship systems? My field? Boom, here's some ways of doing kinship systems. You want to talk about ecology? Here's some models. You want to talk about the way the brain works? Here's the video. So a combination of audio, video, but books, textbooks, books where students don't have to. Right now, we're Xeroxing books. We're Xeroxing Xeroxes in books. Students we have 3 or 4 books for 50 people. So it's really baseline. Because faculty are having difficulty figuring out accountability. Things like, how do you do a class syllabus? How do you do curriculum planning? How do you do testing? How do you do accountability testing? How do you do pre-test, post-test? How do you measure any depth of knowledge? How do you take a student at ground level and work with that student, that person, that human being, male and female, and pass on the joy of learning? So in order to pass on the joy of learning, you've got to have faculty that are joyous in their learning and teaching, to pass that on with a commitment for it. So I think that's an area that, boy, that's wide open. We really need that at all levels. We also need to pull out graft and corruption. When I arrived here 4 months ago, I was told by a lot of people, hey, it costs 10,000 rubles to get into this university. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, there are ways. There are ways of people bribing all the way through, bribing not just with money, but with services and products and things and access, teachers to give that student that 5 or that 4, because if they get a 3, they're dead. And ways of doing it all the way through the system, and by the time they get to the university, having categories of people, front door, back door categories, and manipulating them to make sure people get in. Okay. So how do you get an ironclad entrance exam? How do you get an entrance exam that will cover all of Lithuania, the provinces, the bright, talented kids that are out there in the farms and the boonies? How do you get the very best out that are still learning, still willing to learn? And No, we don't have that system in place right now.
The people in the city are the only ones that are...
Our statistics are that CONUS has not had a university. CONUS has had a technical institute. When we started this university a year and a half ago, the mandate for this university is we want the humanities. And what they meant by the humanities is everything not science. Thinking, everything in terms of literature, languages, the arts, the social sciences, that's all they call that, the humanities. We want everything that is not science because we have been limited to science by a regime that has, number one, closed CONUS off. It's been the forbidden city, the closed city. You couldn't get into the city. We're talking about a city of 200,000 people. Okay, closed city, not counting the regions. And then to open it up, to give the people in the city a place where they can start forming a core of their culture. Maybe having the Philharmonic come and play. Maybe having small music workshops, art workshops. Maybe having events that include children, because right now there's such a schism between the world of children and the world of adults. There's no interaction, basically.
My batteries...
These awful paintings on the wall when they have such wonderful Lithuanian artists. Look at those. They're just disgusting.
They are. I saw some of your husband's work and they were wonderful.
He's great.
Oh, it's amazing. Okay.
Okay, let's refocus. We're tired. We've worked on this for a week.
Yes.
Yes.
What I'd really like to do is to... well, let's you hit something that I didn't think about doing, and that's talking about CONUS. Mm-hmm. Briefly, tell us about why CONUS, the history of the university, and I mean, ever so briefly, as to why CONUS has been the Forbidden City.
Okay. CONUS. When I grew up in the States, I grew up having pictures of CONUS around, and in CONUS was Bauhaus architecture, and Art Nouveau, and Art Deco, and Laisvės Alėja, Freedom Street, which is like a mini boulevard in Central Europe, anywhere, Paris, for example, and Čiurlionis, the great Lithuanian artist, and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and all the symbols of Lithuania as a state. Especially that small square, which is now the other side of the street from the university, which is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the traditional crosses, the relics of Darius and Girėnas, the American flyers that flew very much like Lindbergh across the Atlantic and then got shot down by the Germans, unfortunately. The main Čiurlionis, which is the shrine, the ethnographic museum, and then all of the structures around that were built up with the state banks, etc. So CONUS, to me growing up, was the heart of Lithuania. And it had been the capital during the time of Lithuanians' independence. And as the capital, it had attracted and raised a population to be the next leaders, so that half of the graduates, I would venture more than half of the graduates of Vytautas Didysis University, Vytautas Magnus University, are in Chicago and elsewhere abroad. So why are they abroad? Because when Lithuania was occupied, in the first wave, when the Soviets came in the first time, they occupied it, and they tried to eliminate everybody they could that were in power, either by beating them up, shooting them, shipping them off to Siberia. And I'm sure, Gary, you've heard this. In June, one weekend in June, 60,000 people were shipped in cattle cars. So, but those were not selected at random. Those were people that had any power and influence that they shipped out. And then when the Germans came through, they eliminated, and Kaunas was, as Kaunas and Vilnius as the two big cities were very, very strong Litvak centers, Litvak being Lithuanian Jews. And so that whole population was not only terrorized but annihilated. And then you got the Soviets coming through the second time. And when they came through the second time, Kaunas became like Mer Rouge. Kaunas became a devastated annihilated, dismembered city, not because of the buildings being torn up and broken up, because its population was completely annihilated. People were either shipped off to Siberia, they were shot literally on the street if you had white hands without any callus, you were shot. They went hiding into villages if they could, or they fled. So Kaunas was empty. And I've heard stories all over Kaunas of people that survived that with all the variations, and they're finally publishing books on it. So here we had the capital that was annihilated, and people that were the elite, that were teachers of this university, that was the university in Lithuania to train the leaders, to train people, to ship them. All of the people that went to Vytautas Magnus University went to year for year. Okay, they were the ones that were training and trained to be the literate people of the society. And there they were none of them. And if there were some of them, they were shipped to Siberia. So the population and the others went to Vilnius University, because Vilnius University had not had the Lithuanian influence. It had been a Polish university. So the remnants of that crowd who survived went off to Vilnius, and Kaunas was stuck with nothing. They separated the medicine school and really demeaned it and put it down to basically nurses training and very small technical training. They took the technologies and they embellished them and said, okay, you will be technocrats, you will be techno-mats. We'll accept that. And then they took the arts out and they closed Kaunas off. They closed it off in terms of the Soviet model that there's only one city in every republic that got money, that got resources, and that was Vilnius. The capital, the showplace where people came in, you could come to Vilnius, and that was the showplace, and they would not let people out of Vilnius, so you never saw what happened in the hinterlands. And in Kaunas, they gave it nothing. Now, what happened to the people in Kaunas? What happened to this bombed-out city? What happened to that city was people from the provinces came into that city. So you had Russian soldiers and officers and people from the provinces, and they started creating, again, the first generation urban. And in creating it with no resources, they took to commerce, they took to wheeling and dealing, they took to trying to make it happen in some way that they can. And they were successful. So Kaunas is known as a city of wheelers and dealers. They joke about the Kaunas mafia, okay, because they're tied into trade networks all over the Soviet Union. Tremendous potential for commerce. Tremendous potential for tourism because of the beauty of the city, but inaccessible. I was here 12 years ago. I could get to Kaunas on an IREX. I was here, and I got to Kaunas 5 times. I had to come in the morning, and I had to leave that night and be in the museum, and I was tailed, and there was somebody with me all the time because it was too dangerous. What was dangerous? What is dangerous about Kaunas? It's dangerous because the people here have figured it out. Have figured out how to survive and live despite the fact that they have been isolated. They are ethnically Lithuanian, most of them. I think the statistics are like something like 90%. Their youth, I mean, when not a single guy from Kaunas went to the army this year. And they protect their kids by putting them in sports schools, by putting them in these technical schools, by giving them anything that they can, because they have very limited access to Vilnius. And it's developed this kind of false rivalry. The people in Vilnius say, oh, well, Kaunas, they don't really have high culture. Okay? And that rivalry is nurtured to isolate Kaunas. So for me, coming into Kaunas, I wept. I mean, there are days that I get up and I say, I can't believe that I'm here. It's in my lifetime, where I can look across the street and see the newly rebuilt Tomb of the Unknown Soldier with rocks from every place in Lithuania where people have been tortured and maimed and just annihilated. And the cross is up in place, and Čiurlionis is still there, and Lenin off the square, and people walking down the street, and even if there's no food in the stores, even if there's no goods in the stores, people walking down the street, raising children, and having the courage to send their children and the children to come to a place where they will be able, where they are able, where I am committed to having them learn the skills and tools and concepts and ideas and feelings of being free people. And that's a tremendously powerful thing for me. it's something that I feel so committed to that I can't imagine myself doing something else right now. I can't envision myself in this point in time doing anything but this. And I don't mean just this. I mean, in addition, I'm doing a Talka Lietuvai program, Aid to Lithuania program, and all, double jobs and triple jobs because there's so much that needs to be done. But I think the fact that if we are successful, if I'm successful in developing, with the help of everybody else that is willing to come in, a plan of action, then that plan of action can be transferred to other schools of higher education. It can, not only in Lithuania, but throughout the Soviet Union, to other places where people can learn how to. It's the how-to. How do you do it so that you nurture individuality, creativity, learning, freedom, ways of thinking that empower people to create. And I think that's where change begins. I think that's where the extraordinary slavery of and I use that term very consciously because it's slavery. It's teaching people how to be slaves, can be turned around in allowing them and nurturing them to be who they are, human beings, creative, talented, bright, superb, magnificent human beings.
What's the potential of Vytautas Magnus University?
I think the potential is turning the Soviet Union around. I think the potential is to be for the schools that are big, I think the potential is to see in action a small-scale, functioning free university, and to see it acting in all the steps in between. And I have no secrets. I'll share them with anyone here. I mean, I will just keep this for Lithuanians or the Balts. I'll share it with anybody in the system to see how it works, to be the cultural broker of putting bits and pieces together and seeing how it works with teams. I think the potential is not just that these young people will learn and experience and graduate with skills that they can then apply and be leaders, and not just the men but the women. Empowering the women, that they are equally as, if not more so, the core of passing on culture, passing on all of that. But I think for the rest of the system that has been taught how to produce slaves, to teach them that one can, or to demonstrate that one can take the very same set of circumstances and teach people how to be free. And that, I think, is the potential.